Great, thank you, and thank you everyone for coming this morning, and welcome to a great venue. An exciting day for Australian rugby as we announce the continuation of Joe's commitment through to the end of July 2026, and the very exciting news to announce Les Kiss as the incoming Wallabies head coach from the end of July 2026 through till the end of calendar year 2028, which picks up obviously the pivotal marquee event of the home Rugby World Cup in 2027. Important to note, it's been a very thoughtful, very considered and very focused recruitment process, and we've been largely focusing on stability, continuity, continued progression, which Joe has led over the last period of time, cultural growth amongst the group, and ultimately the performance elements that both these leaders bring. I'll just finish by saying that a lot of focus is on the head coach, which is understandable. We've looked at an overall system solution here, and whilst our head coach is hugely important, the broader management team and the stability across the management team that drives the performance on and off the field is equally as important. And we believe that we've got a plan now through to the end of 2028, which provides that stability, that continuity, and hopefully that continued progress on performance. I'll now open for questions. Thank you.
So guys, one sec, I'll just move the mics to Phil quickly. Thank you. Your song, mate. Good. Right guys, over to you.
Phil, Queensland Rugby played hardball, I see.
I think we've ended up in a really elegant solution here, which provides certainty and system, what we think will be system success. And so obviously securing Joe for that longer period, allowing Les to continue the progress on what's a really important market for us in Queensland, and then have that time to transition into that Wallaby head coach role is a really neat and really elegant and really sort of one team solution. So we're really pleased with where the process has ended up. Yeah, I think that it goes to track record of Les's coaching abilities. Obviously, understanding different markets when you're an international coach is really important, and the continued cultural progression, which I think Joe's done a great job in leading with the management team to now, and obviously the background that Joe and Les have together over a long period of time on the international stage with a lot of international success, is really important to us. Yeah, look, I think that we've been focused, and with Peter leading the high performance team, on integrity and ensuring that we always had transparent conversations and always had the best interests of Australian rugby at heart, and what's the right process, not in the short term, but as we go through to the World Cup in 27 and then beyond. And Joe's been great in those conversations, and obviously the recruitment process that we went through was important, and I think we've ended up in a really good solution.
Well, having a head coach come in a year before the World Cup, is that enough time for the Wallabies to coach?
Yeah, look, I think that because of the process and the person that Les is, there's a lot of continuity in the background that Joe and Les have together, and it probably goes back to my final statement, where it's not always just around the head coach; it's the continuity across the management team, and there'll be a lot of stability and continuity amongst that broader management team, which we think will lead to the best performance we can have going forward into 27.
What's the plan for the Rugby Australians back around getting Les around the Wallabies group so far? Tony comes in 2026 as seamless as possible.
Yeah, look, I think again under Joe's leadership and Pete's high performance leadership, we've been focused on a one system solution across our 4 provinces right through to the Wallabies, and that sort of activity is already happening, where the 4 head coaches are coming in and spending a lot of time in the Wallabies environment, and that will continue through 2025 as it did in 2024. Look, I think we've ended up in our desired solution in terms of that continuation of growth at the Reds under Les's leadership, and then Joe spending more time with the group for a longer period of time through to the end of July 2026, and then a seamless transition. So I think that we've ended up in a really good solution. We think that the transition and the solutions are really elegant and really neat, and Joe will finish up as head coach at the end of the 3 tests of the Nations Cup in July 2026, and Les transitions across to lead the program, and we think we've got the best solution. I did joke when we walked in saying welcome home, but it's great to have someone who's been embedded in the system for a long period of time, understands the history of Australian rugby, spent time offshore. I think that what we often underestimate is the importance of that experience offshore in different environments, in the way the game's played differently around the world, and so for Les to experience that and then come back into the Australian environment with that background and with that history, I think sets Les up for success, but sets the system up for success.
I'll shift the mic to Les. Yep.
Sorry,
yeah, there's a bit of background noise, isn't
there is. Please speak up. Thank you.
Yeah, look, we're really confident with the outcome that we've come to, and the thorough process that we ran, and the enormous confidence that we have in Les's leadership. And I know that we get very focused, certainly in the Australian market, around World Cup success. Something which we're trying to pivot to is actually winning test matches between World Cups, which ultimately sets you up for World Cup success. And there's examples of teams that haven't done well in World Cups, but they've done particularly well between World Cups, and that sets up a sustainable system. So, whilst the World Cup is a big focus of all of ours, winning consistently in test matches is equally as important.
There's been a long line of well-credentialed coaches sitting where you are over the last 20 years. Australians really demanding sort of winning letters like us. What's your sort of grand plan, and what gives you the confidence that you can get there and turn it around?
Well, firstly, I'd like to say the process, Phil, Peter and Dan has been fantastic. Going through the chats that we've had, obviously the odd chat with Joe as well, gives me a lot of confidence about where Australian rugby's going. The governance process and everything's just really aligning into a really strong point. And those are things that are massively important that underpin what we do. We talked about earlier, it's not just about a one person, it's a team, and it's a powerful team that we have together. So we'll find the solutions together. This is a country that expects a lot in the sporting market for sure. And I'm very clear with what I want to be able to do with that team, but I know that the continuation that we're building here, the players have a lot of confidence in what's happening in Australian rugby at the moment. I'm not here to rip and tear. I'm going to make sure I dovetail as much as I can, and I'll bring my points of difference into play. But we have a lot of things in common. So I have a lot of confidence that the governance process and the way that we operate in a high performance program here is fantastic. And I had a lot of confidence in the coaching groups that are spread out through the country in the super provinces, and I'll have a lot of confidence in what the players have. We're a bloody talented country, aren't we? And we can play the game. So looking forward to the challenge.
Les, first off, congratulations.
Thank you.
I imagine it's going to be a bit of a challenge over the next 12 months or so. The Reds' commitments, they're coming into the Wallabies. Can you just speak a bit about how you plan to navigate that?
I'll just do what I'm doing now. My job as a Reds coach is to obviously do my best for the Reds in the market there, but the stronger we are, the stronger Rugby Australia is. And I'm part of that system to make sure that flourishes. I'll just be going back and doing what I can on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, to build something that's special there with the people I have around me. I've got some great people in my professional rugby department there as well, second to none that I've worked with, some great team of coaches. So we'll just continue to do our job, because that's only going to serve us down the road. And obviously with the Lions series coming up and other important test matches through the end of the year, I know my remit there, and we've got things to do at Reds, so I'm looking forward to that as well. But in this occasion now, I'm really comfortable about the process. I'm really comfortable in terms of understanding where I'll land with this, and talking to the players at the Reds. I'd imagine there's some good conversations happening in the other states as well. It's an important period, and we've got good people working away to make sure we get that right. Well, we chat often anyway through all the performance processes, players, whether they're injured or their form and all those things. So that's a continuing process that's happening anyway. I think the truth is, part of this process is to make sure that Joe has a good chance to focus on what the Wallabies are on about. My process after this will be going back into the Reds. We go to Fiji on Saturday and do a job there. I'll be focused on the Reds, and I know that what we have in place will be able to tap in whenever I need to on any conversation, but they'll mainly be around what are our players doing, how can we help the process to get the Wallabies right from now. So I know my remit after this is to get it into the Reds and get that working. And as a head coach of one of the states here, we're always involved with what's happening there. So that'll just be the natural process that'll continue.
You've had an extraordinarily successful union coaching career for one whose background is solid rugby league. There must have been things that you learnt in rugby league in North, New South Wales and Kangaroos that you apply to your coaching career. What's your North Star? What did you learn there that you applied to union to be so successful?
Look, it's a long process, coming from the 80s into this place around 2000, changing into rugby. I think you learn a lot of things along the way, but one thing that's absolutely important, you don't get anywhere on your own. Places that build strong people around you, that you have a team focus, those are the teams that win premierships. Those are the teams that grow and can continue to meet the challenges on any level. In every coaching group that I've been involved with, including Joe and Declan when I went to Irish rugby, when we worked closely together, if you miss those marks, you don't get anywhere. And I know that was a real big focus when we were working together, that one team focus, making sure all the states work well together, or the provinces in Ireland, understanding how you bring people together, be on the same page, and live and die together. That might sound cliched, but the team matters, and everyone understands how they work within that team is absolutely massively important. And if they feel they go home every day, they know how they significantly contribute in their way to make that pointy end really strong is absolutely important. And that's part of how I would lead, making sure that everyone knows what they do and it matters. And building a good team culture is massively important to get the success you want in any environment, I believe.
There's massive couple of years ahead, obviously World Cup in 27. What experiences have you learned from the World Cups in 2011 and 2015 that help prepare you for what's to come in 27?
Well, I think getting your prep right, you need a little bit of luck in those environments. Injuries can come in and play. So part of this, we can actually work hard to make sure we build that right depth chart in the right way, because sometimes things just catch you unawares, don't they, in those markets, and you can't solve some of those things on the run, and then another team might have the luck. But try and take that luck out a bit, but you do need a bit of luck in those big games, in those big tournaments. But essentially, I'll go back to the whole culture. If your culture's strong, you can go far. And once you get to the pointy end, those games become, a 50-50 call here and there. Building the type of resilience and robustness you need in your squad to be able to go through 8 to 9 games in a row to win it is part of what you have to be able to do and grow.
I'm sure you've got some selection differences with Joe. How are you going to manage what your thoughts might be in 2 or 3 years?
Well, I prefer twisties. You prefer
just plain chips.
Plain chips. Sorry. Just a bit.
And how might you juggle that? If you have different philosophies around selection, how might you're preparing for a World Cup and you might have a difference on a player? How does that get resolved over the next 2 years before you come in?
Well, I think, if I'm really honest, I think the meat and veg of the game, the real important things, we've got a common ground on, and that's massively important. If I went in there and tried to change everything in a way that took the guys' minds off what they have to do in those really critical areas of the game, it'd be wrong. So I'm pretty confident that we've got the right common ground of what we do. The points of difference, sometimes the selection comes down to a certain game and a combination you want to put into play against a certain opposition. So those differences won't be about it's different to Joe, it'll be about what fits that moment now. And the coaches will have, as it always is, you come in together, you work out what you think's necessary. So I don't see any major, massive differences there. I think we've got the right things right around the key areas, the key tenets of the game. We've got very common ground on, and I think that's important. Yeah.
What involvement, if any, will you have with the Wallabies after the Super Rugby? Like, will you travel with the Australian team, or will that in between seasons?
No, I'll be focused on the Reds and making sure that process goes on. And as I said earlier, the regular conversations that we'll have in different things about the players in the system and how the Fraser McWrights, the Tates and the Harrys, how they're all going in our system and what Joe needs as feedback in those areas. Obviously, throughout any Wallaby window, we're always welcome. We come in and the training camps are there. So those things have already happened regularly. So I don't see much difference. It's just that I'm still the Queensland Reds coach. Down the road, I'll take over from Joe.
By the time August rolls around next year, Joe, you're the head coach of the Wallabies. I know you talk about the importance of the team, but you'll be the head coach of the team that's about to play at a home World Cup, which carries its own pressure. It's your first test job. Apprehensive about that runway, that it's quite short, that you've got a year and then you're at a home World Cup.
Oh, look, just taking on the role, scary but exciting at the same time. It's an honour to do what I'm doing, and to your question, I think the things that we do well together, the things that how we see the game together, the way we see how culture should be built, they're all underpinning in this. So it's not going to be any excuses there. There's going to be strong things in place that I can tap into and dovetail and bring my points of difference to. That continuation that Phil talked about earlier is massively important in terms of making sure when I step in there, people are still certain about how they work and how they do their job, and maybe the difference will be my jokes are better than Joe. You know what I mean? That might be the only difference. But sorry, Joe.
Yeah.
You
haven't got much to beat.
No, I'm not trying to be flippant there, but I'm just saying it's massively important that the players know that it's not a rip and tear. It's come in there. How do I dovetail and make that work better? In the continuation process that we've had here from day one, when we first chatted about this with Phil, Peter, and Dan. That's what I'm really confident about, that's going to work well, and we'll keep our conversations going along nicely. And when that tipping point comes where it does transfer, I feel pretty good that we'll be able to just move quickly. There may be some points of difference, and the way things are done different. That's going to be natural, but I do feel confident that the players will buy in pretty quickly into how I do things. Yeah.
Nice, Joe.
Yep.
I'm going to ask you first, but when you look to ask Joe to stay involved in the program through to that World Cup, it's obviously very short time.
Yeah, that's something we'll chat about once we get going on this. I think the most important thing is that we get this out of the way, and but over the years we've always chatted, haven't we? Talking about rugby and all those things. So Joe will be a resource, no doubt, in some way. So we'll get to those things later on, and we'll discuss how that'll fit. Absolutely.
What's your feeling around the assistant coaches, Les? Do you intend to bring other assistant coaches that you work with into the Wallabies environment? Will you take over?
That'll be all sorted out over the next probably 3 to 6 months in that area. Most of the process has been considered around it, get this transition right, and how do we keep the continuation right. Make sure we stabilise that, get stability, as you said, Phil. If we get that stable, then we can start to say where do we need to go. Joe's got a job to do with the Lions and the TRC, and then the Novembers. So there's some of those things that'll continue on, and how that'll evolve to anything further, that'll be some decisions made over the next 3 to 6 months, I'd imagine. So.
There's been the roles off the team. Was it your preference to start training late during the spring tour, or did you feel obliged to proceed to the Reds for 26?
Well, as I said earlier, it was a very considered, thoughtful process. The discussions were deep and but healthy. I think you must say they were good, working together to make sure this worked. What I didn't want to do is have a double job as such. What I wanted to do is make sure I could focus on one. Joe focuses on that, and I think we've come to a great solution, to tell you the truth. I'm very optimistic that this will be something that is necessary. The transition of coaches are massively important. If there's a big gap, a new coach comes in and no one knows what's going to happen, that's the biggest place you don't want to be in. So, you know, I feel comfortable with how it's all landed, that's for sure. Yeah.
I'll move to Joe if we're comfortable.
Thanks, mate. Your jokes aren't that good. Cheers, Marty.
A few phones,
Work.
man.
That's your phone, is it?
Not taken.
Hey Joe, I guess there was probably a very similar feeling of deja vu, similar to when it was let's come back to New South Wales, you having had a previous action rival. What's it like seeing Let's take over the coach?
Yeah, it's a process I stayed out of as much as possible. You know, if Les asked me what the role's like and things like that, happy to talk about that. But it was something that I thought was important. Rugby Australia were independent in doing that, and I'm delighted with what the outcome is. Obviously, I know Les really well. We coached together, and you know, had a bit of success during that period, and so you know, I do think that allows the continuity. And last year was a little bit transformational because we had 19 debutants. There was a lot of change that happened from the year before, and I think people were universal in believing that was necessary. And now, you know, there's a foundation, but I'm acutely aware that there's still a massive calendar coming up, and there's a lot of hard work to do. And I know the players are aware of that as well, and I think, you know, that part of the process was sharing some of the thoughts with the players, and that would also be probably something that Les got a fair bit of support around as well. So, you know, I think when your players have confidence in what you're trying to build and what you want them to build themselves, then I think you're much more likely to get a successful outcome.
Did you need much convincing to stay on?
Yeah, look, not when it was Les and it was going to be able to be dovetailed the way it was. It's funny, it seemed like a long time, but then by the time I'd already agreed to do TRC, it didn't seem that much further into the future. So I suppose as you stack them up, it didn't seem like an extra year. It seemed like an extra sort of 6 months or 8 months. And you know, I think the friendship that goes back a long way made that a lot easier. And you know, the family situation, the support from RA around just maybe getting the family over a little bit more often to Sydney, where I'm usually based, that made it a little bit easier as well. Just so that I feel that I'm getting some balance in supporting, you know, probably my wife in her commitment to looking after our son, and our son getting a bit of growth at the same time.
Joe, was there a desire to potentially stay on to that World Cup? 8 months isn't a long time.
No, and it did seem like that, but I'm really happy with the outcome. I think it's a great outcome for me personally and my family, and it's one that's not too much of a stretch to stay in the role. As I said when first saying that I'd stay through to the TRC, it's been a privilege to be involved. It's been really enjoyable to work with the staff and the playing group that we've had, and so I'm a little bit intimidated by the challenges coming up. You know, 3 Lions tests, and then you're on a plane to play on the Highveld against South Africa. You know, I think all that is a bit intimidating, but geez, what a great challenge. You know, and I know the players are a little bit of the same thought around the challenge that they face.
You would have been consulted about who should get the job. Would you feel like
Wow, Peter, I'm quite lightweight. You know, you put mine and Kissy's weight together and we still don't move a hell of a lot. So, yeah, when I was asked, there were a couple of good candidates, you know, so I intentionally stayed out of the process as much as I could. When I was asked, do you think you could dovetail with Les well, I said, yeah, I do, because that's my honest belief that I think we can dovetail well. I think we will share a lot of the same philosophy, albeit with a slightly different approach in some areas. But I think that like-minded philosophy will allow a pretty smooth transition. That's not the big difference that started last year.
How would you define your philosophy? You say you've got a like-minded philosophy. Can you boil it down to 2 sentences?
I would say people first. So we would both be very much aligned around getting the right people and investing in those people, not just players. And so I think that would be the first philosophy. The second one would be that that we build from the bottom up, that we're not chasing targets, that we're building behaviours. And I've watched Les coaching, well, for a number of years, obviously, when we coached together, but even with Queensland in recent times, and he's been into our environment, and I've seen similarities around that philosophy, probably. So people first, and build what you need from the bottom up, rather than chasing the top end of things when you don't have a foundation to fall back on.
You moved through 3 or 4 captains last year. Have you set, without necessarily telling us who, have you, in your mind, the most likely one captain throughout from now on?
It's a really good question, and it's unfortunately one that I don't have an answer for. I thought Harry did a great job in the back end of the season. I know the gravitas that Alan Alatoa has. James Slipper was captain for one. Liam Wright was captain first up and hasn't played since with his injured shoulder. So I guess that's one thing that we'll throw back into the coaching group. We have a strong leadership group, and they even contribute to how they perceive that the leadership best falls on somebody's shoulders for a particular weekend. But as I said, I felt Harry finished strongly, and I felt the others did a good job when they were in the breach. So yeah, it's something that I guess we'll try to get our selection right first, and then we'll narrow to that pinpoint positions of leadership and that captaincy.
Joe, would you consider staying on in any role after you depart as head coach through to the World Cup?
It isn't really something that I'm planning to do, but you know, I had a guy I coached with ring me a couple of weeks ago. Would I look at their last 2 games and give them some feedback on some things that I see in their game, and can I bounce a few ideas back to them, and did that for them. So I have a, you know, maybe a sounding board remit that would be a friendship orientated thing as much as a professional rugby formal involvement, just because I'll stay interested in the game, and I love the game because of the interdependence and that real teamwork that you need to deliver a performance. And
you know how difficult it is to be a test coach. I mean, there's his first test midway through next year. Are you confident he can take the ball, pass from you, and go on to the Rugby World Cup and have success?
I'm absolutely confident that he'll do a great job. I think how fickle World Cup success. I sat in the coach's box in a final in 2023, and probably everything that could go against us pretty much didn't fall our way, and we lost by a point. Now I know that's how fine the margins are when you're talking about World Cup success, but success for me is getting the performance behaviours right, getting the culture right. That's as successful as you can be as a coach, and I have total faith that Les can do those things, and just that little bit of fickle luck. That's something that you try to stack in your favour as much as you can, and I know Les will do a good job of that. But will he win the World Cup? Heck, I don't think anyone can answer that.
Joe, Noel obviously spoke recently about
Yeah, look, I speak to a number of those players who were regular starters for us, but also try to stay out of the way of the super coaches, because I know their relationship with the player is what's most important in the present time. I had a couple of discussions with Noah in the lead up to the decision he made, and disappointed with the decision. It's not a long-term decision, and I think Noah is still a young player, and can still have a future with the Wallabies, I think, in the longer term. So yes, I'll have a discussion with him for sure, because I do talk to the players, not about their current performance often, just about how they're seeing their game at the present time, and some of it is just about making some of the decisions that we have to make ahead of the time, like trying to get our schedule together, where I think players contributing to some of the decisions we're making around putting our game weeks together in the future. A game driver like Noah was important in that as well.
Can we get clarity, Joe, with regards to like players like Noah and a couple of others who said that they're leaving at the end of this year, about their selection status for the Lions and beyond?
Yeah, I think we were pretty consistent last year around prioritising the players who've committed their future to Rugby Australia, but no one is out of the mix. And if Noah's at the top of his game, or Langy Gleeson, or Tom Hooper, or Rob Leota, some of those guys, at the same time, there's about a dozen guys who are either announced or on the way to being announced who are staying and will be committing their futures to Rugby Australia. And we think there's merit in that, because we think we'll see them out here at the Allianz Stadium playing for the Tars, or up in Suncorp, or across, in Perth or in Canberra, because we want those players to put a stake in the ground in their super teams, so that we're strong in super, because we know that the stronger our super base, and it's exactly what Les was talking about earlier, if he's doing a really good job with the Reds, then that helps the Wallabies, because those players get momentum, they're well coached, they have confidence, that belief gets built in those 4 super clubs. That's a great base for us to then springboard into a more confident Wallabies environment.
So you still prioritise players who are staying?
Yeah, we will. So clarity is that we'll prioritise them, but clarity is also that nobody is out of the mix. And so, if there is someone we believe that will add value and is clearly outplaying his opponents as far as selection is concerned for the squad, then we know how tough the Lions are going to be. We know how deep they're going to go in really experienced, athletic and combative players. So we know that we're going to have as close as we can the best group to compete against those guys.
The last couple for Joe, please.
What's your benchmark of success this year for the team? What do you make of Australia's chances of beating the Lions?
Our benchmarks are those boring performance behaviours that I've mentioned before. How efficient can we be in our ball carry and clean? How accurate can we be at line out and scrum? Because the other things that we can truly influence and almost control at times, what we can't control is the outcomes and the bounces of the ball. If we put the ball into space and we don't get the bounce, well, we can live with that, in that we've seen the space and played to it. But the game is so fickle that we can't control those outcomes. How confident are we of success against the Lions? I'm confident that we can be competitive. And if we're competitive, then we've seen in Super Rugby, about half the games have been 1-score games. If we can be within a score of the Lions and there's 5 to go, then we're a chance. And we've got to give ourselves that chance by being really good in our performance behaviours. I know it didn't work out against Ireland, but against England, those 1-score games where and you're talking about the number 2 team in the world and a team that will rank well above us, and we've inched our way up those world rankings. Our challenge is to keep working our way up those rankings this year, by being competitive. And I don't think we want to get distracted by outcomes. We want to be really process driven. And I know that's boring, but Les is of the same ilk, so you're going to get the same thing for the next few years as well. He's very process orientated as well.
Last one, please.
Where do you think his best rugby plays? Is it in Australia or is it overseas that the Wallabies can perhaps get the best out of him? Would you like him to say or where is it?
Yeah, I'd love for Taniela to get the best out of himself in the very near future, because he is an immensely powerful man. He's got good test match experience. We don't have massive test match experience. In fact, if James Slipper doesn't get picked, we lose a quarter of our caps in one man. So when you compare what we're going to be playing against with the Lions, to have his experience, to have the power he brings, and the confidence he can give around our scrum set piece, it'd be great for him to be at the peak of his powers. How we get there, I think Dan McKellar has done a great job. Tom Carter in the background with his S&C work, they've done a great job in trying to get Taniela closer to where he needs to be the best version of himself on the field. And I'm still hopeful that we can see the best of him, because if we can see the best of him, I'd love to see him in Australia, because I'd like us to make the best use of what could be a really pivotal player for us.
So we're really short on time, Peter. Quickly as I move them on.
Is head coaching, is that for you after July, or would you consider another role somewhere else?
No, I didn't consider this one. So, when Pete rang me, I'd said no to the role a few times. But it's a bit like Les. We have a friendship going back from other jobs that we've done together, and so he said, just we need a bit of experience. In other words, we need an old guy. So I wanted to make myself feel young, so I got Mike Cron and Laurie, and so as Owen Toolan described us, Dad's Army, we've tried to do the best we can, and so I don't foresee that, but I know the privilege, and I know how many people would love to do a job like this, and so it's something that for a small town kid born in Kawakoa, New Zealand, it's been a fantastic opportunity for me, and those opportunities to see the world for my family has been great as well. So it's not something that I'd ever rule out completely, but it's definitely not my plans. The boat on the lake and trying to get my golf handicap down, which is, don't ask me what it is at the present time. That'd be a couple of really ambitious goals that I'd have beyond the end of July next year.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Joe.
Peter, dovetail seems to be the buzzword. Is that ultimately what got Les over the line, and did that potentially rule out other candidates like a Waugh check, who's a bit of a mover and shaker?
Yeah, we've always talked about system connection. How do we actually keep people connected right across our super clubs? But then how do we get alignment from that into the national program? And what Joe and Les bring is that in spades, connection that actually going to lead to bringing the system on and continuing on through to the World Cup. So I think if you looked at the other people that we had involved, look, some big names, but the reality is that we need to get some consistency going forward. We've created something pretty special, we think, and it's just taking that forward into the 27 and beyond. Phil talked a little bit about how do we maintain consistency of performance. Sometimes it's good to, we've got a decade of gold. We talk about, performing well in 27. How do we get the Wallaroos up at 29? Got a home Olympic Games. But the reality is, how do we actually consistently get our performances of all our national teams out there winning on a regular basis? And doing that is just making sure that everything we do is process driven. It's about people. People is priority. We connect really well with rugby in Australia, our key stakeholders, and the people that we've got, that are doing the hard graft on a daily basis are working in a similar fashion that's going to lead us to success.
Pete, was Les always the number one kind of choice because he was just up the road, and I know you can have worldwide searches, but it seems like we've gone back to what a lot of people thought he was going to be.
Yeah, look, Les has always been in the mix, and we've always seen it. We wanted to make sure that we were complete with it. You know, the whole process of how we went from the start to find and look at, you know, everyone that's available out there in the game. You know, we really looked far and wide to make sure that we get the right person. That's why it's taken time. But it's also taken time to make sure that not only when we got the preferred candidate being Les, is getting that sort of seamless solution that goes from, you know, finishing off at Super Rugby, closing out with Wallabies with Joe, and Les taking the next stage. So we've had to take a bit of time and work all through the different pieces there. Yeah, we had a fairly large, long list to start off with. Got pretty short pretty quick, because when you're looking for things that are around connection, how we can keep people together, where we've got alignment of philosophy, and a real passion around, you know, working with people that actually, you know, care about the people that they've got involved in the program. You know, you get pretty short pretty quickly, and we fell on Les as the primary candidate, and we worked through and we looked at all the different issues and challenges that come along with, you know, contractual pieces and making sure that we deliver on strengthening the Super Rugby franchises. And we've been really clear that Super Rugby is the cornerstone of the game. You know, we've got 4 clubs. It really gives us the foundation that underpins the Wallabies. And if we don't have that strong with the best coaching team, or we keep on tinkering or taking people in and out of it on a regular basis, we're actually undermining the ability to be actually consistent with our performances. So I'm really happy, excited that we've got Les on board coming in. I'm really happy that Joe's continue on to give us another 18 tests. We've got 18 more to go, and I think that 27 is an exciting outcome, and we'll build something very special over the coming years together.
At what stage of the process did you sort of find out that Joe was keen to stay on for that extra 9 months? Did that change how this whole thing happened with Les in terms of the starting process?
What? Say that again, sorry?
At what stage of this movement of Les did you sort of confirm that Joe was able to stay on for an extra 9 months, and that changed how this sort of rollout was going to happen?
I think it sort of comes through some discussions. I think, you know, when we work together and collectively sit down and you start putting in, I suppose, the jigsaw together, you start going, okay, well, can we do this? Joe, you're able to comfortable with this piece, blah, 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 and then you build out the plan. It doesn't come and say, Joe, can you do that? It's actually a collective, and I think there's been a number of meetings of, okay, this solution needs another discussion, let's get in the room and let's talk it out. Les talks about the bunker, but, you know, there's a fair few discussions that we've had as, how do we really crystallise this plan? Are we comfortable with that? Are you comfortable with that? And then let's build through, and we've been able to do that over a series of meetings. You know, Phil talked about, let's do it, you know, the process is going to be relatively quick. I think we've been really diligent in getting it right, and I think the outcome from here is that we're going to set a platform for us to have a seamless transition, continuity in the system, and a stability of our super franchises through into 27 and beyond.
Speaking of continuity, the coaching staff will be even more important, I imagine, when Les takes over. Like, is it the idea that Les will be the only changing piece, or, you know, you don't want to reset that entire staff at that point?
No, we've talked, you know, collectively together. There's going to be an important, you know, Les is going to have to, you know, as he talks about, he's got a point of difference, and he's going to need to bring a point of difference. But the majority of our group and management will continue through. And it's not just the coaching team, it's the back of house, you know, from our team management to our physiotherapy, our analytics team to, you know, like it's, you know, we're not a big team, but it's really important to keep consistency across in that space. And we've already talked to, you know, the staff as of yesterday, the continuity of those into the World Cup. But we've got comfortable in our meetings with Les and Joe before we headed down that line.
You guys were talking to Stuart Lancaster at one point about a potential role. Is that still on the table, or is that done now with this new?
No, we don't. We've landed on the position with Les and Joe and the coaching team going forward. So, you know, we have plenty of other applicants within the system that we've made consideration, but I think what we've landed here is the best solution for Australian rugby.
Last couple of pieces.
Joe,
look, Joe and I have been mates for a long period of time, and and we'll always have that ability to pick up the phone and have a chat. And as he said to you before, like he wants to work on his handicap and maybe get that boat out on Lake Taupo. But the reality is he's only ever a phone call away. We've got a job to do now. We've got 18 test matches, we've got a Lions series, a TRC, a Bled, a really important spring tour, which actually, if we don't get to top 6, puts us in a difficult frame for a pool draw for 27. So we've got such a heavy plan ahead that we've got to deliver on that. And then look, going forward, we'll have discussions, and the relationship will always be connected. And Les, so the door's open.
Last one.
The Reds weren't as keen to let Les go out early, like for Australian rugby. The second part of the question, Daniel Tupou, what's your understanding of that? It sounds like he's going overseas. Views on that?
I think come back to where I was saying before. It's important that we keep Reds strong, and in our discussions. So, they've actually got a good platform operating at the moment. Great victory over the weekend up in Suncorp. We need to keep Super Rugby continuing on. Les has got an existing contractual agreement. We work collectively with the Reds, the QRU. We talk about system connection and alignment. We had a catchphrase called centralisation. We've parked that. It's about people and stakeholders working collectively to a plan. And everyone has got a responsibility. And the responsibility at the moment for Les is let's get the best result for the Reds. Joe, let's get the best result for the Wallabies. How do we do that collectively? Well, it's best is to make sure that the Reds are strong in 26 with a seamless standover. So those discussions with the QRU have been really good, and we've found the right solution, I think, collectively as rugby in Australia. And Taniela, look, we're working with all the players that are in the system. As Joe said, we ideally want to see the best of Tani, and we'd love to be continuing to stay in Australia. I'll leave that for the coaches to make the selection. We'll continue to work in trying to secure all our players over the period. We've already made, I think, around about 19 announcements and collective signings over the last period of time, and we'll continue to sign people over. We've got some more coming out. We work hard in the background through the National Contracting Panel meetings, and that's a really solid way of how do we identify not only securing our depth chart and going through to 27 and beyond, but making sure that we're actually there's a bit of a reset financially. We can afford what we can afford. We've got a really good platform in terms of securing events going forward, and we want to make sure that we've got our best players. And Tanny's important to us, but we want to see the best from him over the next couple of weeks and the month into Super.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate that.
Phil